Barcelona are broke. Barcelona cannot register players. Barcelona need to sell before they can buy. Barcelona need another economic lever. Barcelona need La Liga approval. I swear I have been hearing some version of these sentences every single transfer window for what feels like an eternity now. And then the transfer window actually opens, and somehow Barcelona are being linked with players for big money. Like, how are we offering to buy Alvarez for 100 million euros, and we can also sign Rodri for 80 million euros, and we have already signed Gordon for 80 million euros? Which one is it? Are we broke, or are we not broke? Because you cannot tell me you have no money, and then 5 minutes later, I see you shopping. That's what my girlfriend does, but obviously we know whose money she's using. So today, I want to answer the question, why are Barcelona, one of the biggest football clubs on planet Earth, always apparently broke? Barcelona are still the best club in the world, don't get it twisted, but I can admit Barcelona have not been wonderfully run. God knows there have been some decisions. We will get to those. But Barcelona being broke is actually a lot more complicated than Barcelona simply having 3.74 euros in their bank account. Barcelona still make an absurd amount of money. For the 2025-26 season, the club projected ordinary revenue of about 1.075 billion euros. Yes, billion, with a B. The club said the gradual return to Spotify Camp Nou alone was expected to add around 50 million euros in stadium revenue, while merchandising was targeting record sales of around 200 million euros. So, when someone says Barcelona are broke, the first thing you need to understand is that broke does not mean the same thing for Barcelona as it does for you and me. If I am broke, I cannot order food, and I lose my side chick. If Barcelona are broke, they might still generate 1 billion euros in a year. Different struggle entirely. So what happened? Well, we have to go backwards. And yes, unfortunately, this means talking about Josep Maria Bartomeu. Yeah, that idiot. Barcelona spent years with an enormous wage bill, huge transfer spending, and commitments that became increasingly difficult to sustain. The amount of money we spent on Dembélé and Coutinho, only for them to become bums at Barca, still haunts me. How was Bartomeu still allowed to run the club? Anyway, then COVID arrived, and football clubs suddenly lost massive amounts of matchday and commercial income. Barcelona were particularly exposed because Camp Nou was one of the biggest money-making stadiums in world football. And then Barcelona had a problem that people sometimes misunderstand. Debt is not the same thing as having no revenue. You can earn huge amounts of money every year and still have huge obligations. Think of someone earning $200,000 a year, but owing $1 million, having a ridiculous mortgage, 3 car payments, school fees, a girlfriend, and 3 side chicks. You would look at the salary and think, this guy is rich. His bank account every month is screaming something different. Barcelona were basically the football version of that. They had huge revenue coming in, but they also had huge expenses and debt obligations going out. And then came the famous economic levers. Laporta was doing some crazy things when he got hold of the reins. Man, my word, that phrase became so associated with Barcelona that I'm surprised they did not put a lever in the club badge. In 2022, Barcelona sold 10% of their La Liga television rights for 25 years to investment firm Sixth Street. Sixth Street initially invested 207.5 million euros, while Barcelona recorded a capital gain of 267 million euros from that transaction. They later approved the transfer of another 15% of those TV rights as part of another lever, alongside transactions involving Barca studios and digital assets. And I know what some of you are thinking. Why would you sell future television money? Because Barcelona needed money and financial room now. Imagine your employer saying, I will pay you £5,000 every month for the next 25 years. And you go to somebody and say, give me $1 million today, and I will give you a percentage of those future salaries. You have solved today's problem. Congratulations. Tomorrow you has been robbed, but today you is having a wonderful afternoon and enjoying life. That is basically the trade-off. The levers gave Barcelona immediate resources and helped the club operate, but they also meant giving up portions of future revenue. And this brings us to the part that causes probably 70% of the confusion whenever Barcelona signs somebody. La Liga's squad cost limit. Because signing a footballer and being allowed to register a footballer are two different things. La Liga gives every club its own spending limit based on that club's financial position. It is not one universal salary cap where every team gets the same number. The league calculates how much each club can spend on its sporting squad during the season, taking into account its financial situation. So Barcelona can technically have money to agree a transfer with another club, and still have problems registering the player, because their squad cost position does not give them enough room. This is why Barcelona's stories sound completely insane if you do not understand the rules. Barcelona have signed Dani Olmo, wonderful, Barcelona cannot register Dani Olmo. Excuse me? What do you mean you bought him but he cannot play? Imagine buying a PlayStation and Sony telling you your financial fair play ratio does not allow you to turn it on. And we have actually seen registration problems become a major public issue. For the Dani Olmo deal, in late 2024, La Liga publicly addressed Barcelona's attempt to secure provisional registration for Dani Olmo after a court rejected the club's request for an interim measure. So when you hear Barcelona need to sell before they can register somebody, it does not automatically mean there is literally no cash available. Selling a player can reduce wages, generate transfer income, and create more room within the spending rules. The same thing can happen if a player leaves on loan, takes a pay cut, a contract is restructured, or new revenue becomes recognized. This is also why Barcelona fans became obsessed with the phrase one-to-one rule. In basic terms, when a club is operating normally within the financial rules, money saved or generated can be reinvested much more freely. Barcelona themselves said in 2025 that their financial situation had improved considerably and that the club had achieved the one-to-one financial fair play position. So we are already getting closer to the answer. Barcelona were never poor in the sense of being some tiny club without income. They had a gigantic machine making money, but that machine had an enormous amount of financial baggage attached to it. And then, because Barcelona apparently decided the financial story was not complicated enough already, they started rebuilding Camp Nou, which boggles my mind. It's not like Camp Nou didn't already hold nearly 100,000 people. It's like having 3 girlfriends and then still choosing to have 2 more side chicks. Like to you, buddy. But really? You want to be dealing with 5 women? Damn, why am I so obsessed with side chicks in this video? Do I want a side chick? Okay, back to the video. Now to be fair, this is not some random vanity project. A modernized Camp Nou should make Barcelona much more money long term. More hospitality, better facilities, more commercial opportunities, more matchday income. But building one of the biggest stadium projects in football is not exactly cheap. Barcelona arranged 1.45 billion euros in financing for the wider Espai Barça project, which includes the redevelopment of Spotify Camp Nou and surrounding facilities. And while the stadium was being rebuilt, Barcelona had to play at the Estadi Olympic Luis companies, which meant reduced stadium revenue compared with a fully operational Camp Nou. Barcelona themselves acknowledged lower recurring stadium revenue during the redevelopment period. This is like owning a restaurant that normally prints money, deciding to renovate the entire building, then operating from somebody's garden for 2 years. Yes, the new restaurant will probably be incredible, but while construction is happening, your accountant is staring at you. Then in 2025, Barcelona refinanced 424 million euros of Espai Barça debt, covering more than 40% of that project-related debt with a longer-term structure. And as recently as July 2026, Morningstar DBRS maintained Barcelona's BBB credit rating, while noting that a temporary increase in debt was connected to the final stages of Espai Barça and projecting financial improvement from 2028 once Spotify Camp Nou is fully operational. So even today, the stadium is a huge part of this story. It is both one of Barcelona's financial pressures and one of the things they are relying on to become financially stronger in the future. Which is hilarious. The thing helping make you broke is also supposed to make you rich. So now we can answer the question. Why are Barcelona always broke? Because 4 different things keep getting mixed together. Cash, revenue, debt, and spending permission. Barcelona can have cash. Barcelona can generate enormous revenue. Barcelona can still owe huge amounts of money. And Barcelona can still face restrictions on how much of that money they are allowed to commit to the squad. All 4 of those statements can be true at exactly the same time. That is the part that gets lost when someone just tweets, "Barcelona are broke." And yes, Barcelona absolutely helped create this mess themselves. Nobody forced the club to make every bad financial decision it made. Nobody told them to spend some of the transfer fees they spent. Nobody forced the wage structure to become as enormous as it did. Well, we had Bartomeu and should have got rid of him faster. But the club today is also not exactly the same financial disaster it was a few years ago. And we have Laporta to thank for that. Barcelona reported positive ordinary results of 2 million euros for 2024-25 and projected more than 1 billion euros in ordinary revenue for 2025-26. That does not mean everything is fixed. It means the recovery is actually happening. And this is why Barcelona can suddenly appear in the market for expensive players, while everybody online is asking, "I thought they were broke." Because being financially constrained is not the same thing as being incapable of spending money forever. If revenue rises, stadium income returns, wages come down, players are sold, and debt becomes more manageable, Barcelona create more room to spend. And this is where I have to mention Javier Tebas, because apparently I cannot make a Barcelona finance video without mentioning this man. Barcelona fans love blaming Tebas for everything. Player cannot be registered? Tebas. Salary limit went down? Tebas. Wi-Fi stops working? Javier Tebas. Girlfriend leaves you? Somehow, Tebas was involved. But the reality is that these financial controls apply across La Liga, not only to Barcelona. La Liga publishes squad cost limits for its clubs and says those limits are based on each club's individual financial circumstances. Now, whether you think the rules are too strict, whether you think they damage La Liga's ability to compete with the Premier League, whether you think Tebas wakes up every morning thinking of new ways to annoy Barcelona, that is a different video. And I promise you, I can make that video. I have material. But Barcelona's problems cannot all be blamed on La Liga. A lot of this started with Barcelona. The rules simply made it much harder to hide from the consequences. I still hate the guy, don't get me wrong, but he is not entirely to blame for Barca's financial issues. This might be the most encouraging part for Barcelona fans. The club does not need to magically discover a billionaire owner or find 2 billion euros buried underneath Camp Nou. Barcelona already have the hardest thing to build, the ability to generate massive revenue every single year. The brand is gigantic. Sponsorship is gigantic. Merchandise is gigantic. The fan base is ridiculous. And when the new Camp Nou is fully operational, the club expects stadium revenue to become a major growth engine again. The challenge is making sure the money coming in is no longer being strangled by the commitments going out. That is why Barcelona can look broke today and still have the potential to become one of the financially strongest clubs in football again. So the next time somebody says, "How can Barcelona buy this player? I thought they were broke." You now know the answer. They are not broke in the way you are broke on the 28th of the month. They are Barcelona broke. Which apparently means making €1 billion, owing everybody money, building a €1 billion stadium, arguing with La Liga, selling future TV rights, and then asking if Alvarez is available. Completely normal football club behavior. Anyway, that's all I have. Let me go see my therapist about this obsession with side chicks. Yes, the voice is new because 11 Labs is very expensive.